So in some European countries, inflation seems to be nudging 10%, or at least between 7 and 10%, depending on exactly where you are looking. So absolutely, inflation has been super high across most of the world. Now, there are a few reasons for it, of course. You've got the whole supply chain issue that has been disrupted with the rolling lockdowns in China. Then you have the issue of what's going on with energy. And then you have broader issues to do with perhaps some demand-driven inflation, particularly in the US, where there's been some fiscal stimulus going into the economy. So if we're looking at interest rates, the US, particularly given that very, very high CPI inflation figure we had recently, seems likely to increase rates by at least 75 basis points, maybe even a full percentage point at their next meeting. And Europe, of course, is going to need to move as well, with their first move for many, many years likely to occur in July of around 25 basis points. And we're seeing this across other countries as well. Australia, for example, increased by 50 basis points recently. So absolutely, the central banks are needing to tackle this. And it doesn't seem to be an easy resolution. Perhaps one of the factors that will help to resolve it is we appear to be heading further and further toward a recession, if we're not already in one, which is obviously going to impact demand, and that will cause prices to decrease somewhat, albeit not in a particularly healthy or very pleasant way for many consumers and for many businesses. So if we're looking at the interest rates going up, then that obviously is going to affect both consumers and also businesses. So for consumers, it's going to feed into their mortgages and the cost of them borrowing for anything. So in the United States, mortgages are typically 30-year fixed rate. So it won't affect existing borrowers very much, but it will prevent them from refinancing their loan. Furthermore, it will tamp down on future purchases of houses, which will feed into construction. So it will feed into other companies as a result of what consumers are doing. Now, if we're looking at companies as well, companies will have more floating rate debt, particularly in the US, but also companies are going to issue debt more frequently. So the debt's going to be 5 years perhaps, as opposed to 30 years. So they're going to be more feeling the increase in rates than perhaps consumers are directly, which is obviously going to affect corporate spending. So that's clearly going to feed into more negative sentiment for earnings, which will then feed through into what investors are doing. So in essence, we're going to see some belt tightening more generally. We're also going to see this feed into what consumers can even afford to spend. So anecdotally, or proverbially rather, the cure for high prices is high prices. So as these prices keep going up and consumer savings are going down in most countries, in the US they're at incredibly low levels, and consumers are having to rely more and more on revolving debt, which is what's happening in the US, we're going to see perhaps more pain in the consumer sector, which will obviously affect demand for goods as well.